Well, Donald Trump tweeted last night, Cuban leader Raul Castro has no respect for President Obama. He tweeted, wow, Obama just landed in Cuba, a big deal. Raul Castro wasn't even there to greet him. He greeted the Pope and others, no respect. He also pointed out the slight yesterday.
He's landed in Cuba, and Raul Castro, or Fidel Castro, but Raul Castro, who's the head of Cuba, wasn't there to greet him. Folks, what are we doing? What are we doing? Here's how a thing like that is supposed to work. Number one, he has his people call up, say, who's going to be greeting the president? If they say nobody, you don't go until somebody's there. The head of Cuba, who was there for the Pope, and he was there for other dignitaries that come in, but he wasn't there for the President of the United States. I mean, we are amateur hour, folks. Obama should have turned the plane around and left. I'm not knocking Castro. I mean, if they can get away with this stuff, it's great. They make it a great deal.
Back with me now, Trump campaign national co-chair, Dr. Sam Clovis on the phone. So, Sam, glad to have you back. Sorry about the technical difficulties with the phone. Realistically, though, you just heard, of course, Donald Trump's comment there. Could any president turn around a plane on such a, let's say, diplomatic mission?
Well, I do think that frankly, there's a precedent for this, and I'll just give you a moment in history. When Douglas MacArthur was having issues with Harry Truman stayed airborne until MacArthur landed and was there to greet him. I mean, it was an appropriate thing there, but that was inside baseball stuff. But I do think there's a level of respect, and this should have been arranged ahead of time. The president should have known that he would be greeted by the head of state, which is protocol. And if he was not going to be greeted by the head of state, I would have somebody's butt over in the State Department, because that's unprecedented. It's uncalled for, and frankly, it's embarrassing. I think the president should have made an issue of that, and we should never be talking about it. I mean, the fact that we're talking about it tells you about everything you need to know.
Although, I mean, how do you see this overture, if you like, with Cuba? I mean, there are U.S. hotels that want to be there. I mean, I would assume that Donald Trump, as a businessman, sees that. Yeah. And then this whole idea of China, by the way, has been very quietly buying up small parts of the Caribbean, doing deals, sort of $300 million there, $200 million there. Yeah. So in some ways, if the U.S. can restore a relationship with Cuba, which is not so far from Florida, we protect ourselves, right?
Well, I think there is I can get my head around the notion of normalizing relationships with Cuba. I really can. I'm not, as a Republican and a conservative, I'm not as averse to it as a lot of people might be. And the reason is because I think that one of the things I've always theorized on is the fact that once you start to introduce the free market into a country, you're sooner or later going to be asking, if you have choice at the marketplace, you'll start to ask for a choice at the ballot box. And it may take a generation or two, but that is an eventuality that will occur. And I really think this is really what's going to happen. The Castros are going to die out. Their generation is going to be gone. The next generation is going to see the real world out in front of them. They have the opportunity to gain wealth, and wealth for everyone in the country. And so the country overall would be better off with a market economy. And then eventually you'll see that government change. And I really think that's a possibility. So I'm okay with normalizing relations, but I think it ought to be done on the up and up. And I think that the head of state should have met the president of the United States. Whether I respect Barack Obama or not, he's still the president of the United States, and he should have been respected.
He should have been respected. Point well taken on that. I want to ask you, Sam, if you don't mind, because we referenced it a little bit earlier, the fact that Donald Trump, and it was a list that you are comfortable with as somebody who served our country for a quarter of a century. That is to say, he's starting to name certain members of his foreign policy team.
Right.
Senator Ted Cruz says if Donald Trump is nominated, Hillary Clinton wins, and there is this understanding about foreign policy experience. Here's the comment.
If we nominate Donald Trump, Hillary wins. If you don't want to see Hillary Clinton as the president, then I ask every one of you to come out Tuesday and vote for me 10 times.
So, all right, some humor there on the part of Senator Cruz, which is usually Donald Trump's hallmark.
Right.
But what do you make of that appeal?
Well, I think the issue is it's really interesting that Senator Cruz would come out and make comments about the foreign policy. The thing is, you may have foreign policy experience, but if it's bad experience, it's better to have no experience, and not that Mr. Trump doesn't, because Mr. Trump has done business deals all over the world, and if you've gone out and had to negotiate with countries, and trust me, I know about this because I've had to do it myself. If you go out and negotiate with other countries, you have to deal with those governments. You have to deal with unions. You have to deal with their regulations and rules. You probably know more about the foreign policy of a particular country by doing a business deal there than anybody who can sit there and read a briefing book. And what's worse is Hillary Clinton's foreign policy is going to be a lot like Barack Obama's, and look where that's gotten us. So I would rather have someone who has a much clearer picture of the world, much more realistic, frankly,
more practical
an approach, a view of the world that is actually deals without ideology. And I think Mr. Trump's view is very pragmatic, very realistic. And I think you'll see more and more of that as we put out more policy as we go along.
Dr. Sam Clovis, we thank you so much for the time. Glad to have your thoughts on all of these different parts of the campaign. He is the national co-chair of the campaign for Donald Trump.